So we start talking about the muscle anatomy today. And to give an idea what you're going to expect on the exam. So first of all, as with bones, you will be allowed to use modals. Okay? The questions can be on muscle identification. The question can be, this muscle flexes the elbow, extends the elbow, abducts the arm, adducts the arm, for instance. Does that make sense? The hardest questions will be, I don't want to trip you, I just give you an idea. The hardest questions will be this muscle, and you will have to pick the right combination of origin and insertion. I'm not going to focus on little, tiny, small, deep muscles. Since you can use the modals, you can always look and find out the origin and insertion, okay? Like for instance, for occipitalis muscle, you will see that the origin will be the occipital bone, the insertion will be gallia aponeurotica. For, I don't know, the temporalis muscle, the origin will be the parietal and temporal bone, and the insertion will be the mandible. Okay? Now, again, it's not going to be something like, is that a condylar process of mandible or coronoid process of mandible? It's not, I don't want to trip you. It's a lot of information here. Okay? That makes sense? But you have to think about insertion when I talk to you about it. Right? And I will try to kind of focus, okay, skip, like, don't pay too much attention for insertion here, but pay attention here. And you will have limited list of muscles that you need to know for the exam. I'm not going to ask you to know all 602. That all. If you want, I can, for you especially, I can give 600. Anyway, so few fundamental things about muscle anatomy. Muscles always pull. Always. Okay? Any motion that muscle produces is the result of pulling. Pulling by biceps and brachialis produce the flexion of the elbow. Muscle groups are organized in the agonists and antagonists. One muscle group does, another one undoes. Your quadriceps muscles extend the knee, your hamstring muscles flex the knee. We always talk about groups, that's important. So we're going to talk about knee extensors and knee flexors. There are plenty of muscles. Like you have 3 knee flexors and you have 4 knee extensors. Okay? Now, muscles can be divided in primary movers. The main muscle responsible for a specific move. For instance, it's so convenient to use with a elbow because there is a primary mover, well, there are 2 of them actually. Biceps brachii and brachialis. This dude, you can see biceps brachii and brachialis. Okay? Antagonist. Muscle that opposes that move. In this case, it's going to be triceps brachii. Agonist or prime mover and antagonist are always on the opposite side of the joint they move. Biceps and triceps are on the opposite sides of the elbow joint. Synergist. It is not a primary muscle for the movement, but it helps. For instance, brachioradialis, this muscle. On your hand, you can see it as this part of the forearm. Brachioradialis is the synergist of the elbow flexion. It stabilizes the movement, makes it refines the movement, adds force to the movement. Fixator, synergist that immobilizes bone or the muscle of origin. Multiple muscles of the shoulder rotator cuff muscles that will stabilize the scapula and will, for the more efficient flexion of the elbow. Okay? Obviously, the same muscle may play different roles in different movements. For elbow flexion, biceps is the prime mover. For elbow extension, triceps is the prime mover. They are antagonists on these two movements. Does that make sense? In application to the exam, which movement does this muscle produce? Look at the location of the muscle in relation to the joint. If the muscle crosses the joint anteriorly, it flexes the joint. If it crosses the joint posteriorly, it extends the joint. Always. Pectoralis major crosses the shoulder joint anteriorly. It flexes the shoulder. Latissimus dorsi crosses the shoulder joint posteriorly. It extends and hyperextends the shoulder. Does that make sense? Muscle that is lateral to the joint, like deltoid muscle, will always abduct the joint. Okay? Abduction of the arm. Tensor fasciae latae, here's this muscle. Abductor of the leg. The muscles that cross the joint on the medial side always adduct. Okay? For instance, teres major, that you can see here and you can see here, adducts the shoulder. Multiple adductor muscles, gracilis muscle, they adduct the leg. It should help. Okay? Naming. Pain in the ass. Where is the muscle? Sometimes helps. Like abdominis. Right? Or spinalis muscles. Sometimes they named after shape, like deltoid. Sometimes they named after size. You have adductor longus, adductor brevis, and adductor magnus. Okay, magnus is the large, brevis is the short, longus is long. Okay, direction of fibers. Oblique, rectus, another oblique, and if I will remove the front portion of that dude, you will see transverse. Transverse fibers. Okay? So this is rectus abdominis, this is external oblique, this is internal oblique, and this is transversus abdominis. Number of origins. Biceps has 2 origins, triceps has 3. Attachments. Okay. Flexor carpi ulnaris. Okay. Starts with ulna. Flexor carpi. Where's flexor? Okay. I have extensor carpi ulnaris. Who cares? Extensor carpi ulnaris. Extends carpals. Okay. Insert origin is at the ulna. What muscles do? extensors, flexors. If you look for logic, you're looking in the wrong place. Okay? But I can promise you that I'll do my best not to trip you over on the questions. I'm not going to give you absolutely obvious answers, but say if I ask you about the muscles on the anterior aspect of an arm, like here, okay, these are flexors. So you may have couple flexors that are very different and couple of extensors. And if you understand that these muscles are flexors, you eliminate at least 50% of answers. Does that make sense? Okay? Arrangement of fascicle and how they influence the strength. There are different ones. So for instance, convergent. So in convergent, look at this. Dude, your liver is exposed. Pectoralis major, right here. Origin is at the sternum. Insertion cannot be seen, but it's at the humerus. All those fibers, they have broad origin. Does that make sense? Okay. They insert in pretty much one point of the humerus. So it's really powerful muscle. Does that make sense? All those fibers, they pull one point on the humerus, one attachment. Does that make sense? Greater tubercle. Fusiform. Biceps. Powerful muscle too. Parallel. Sartorius muscle. For some reason my favorite muscle in the human body. The longest muscle in the human body. Sartorius, right here. It's actually pretty weak because think about this. In case of fusiform, all fibers, they originate in one point and they're inserted in one point. So they produce pretty powerful contraction. In case of parallel arrangement, this is how the fibers originate and are inserted. Does that make sense? So they cannot produce that powerful contraction. No. They, look, here's the parallel arrangement. So say this is the origin, this is insertion. So they originate over the large part of, say, bone, and they insert it in the large part of the bone. Let me put it this way. If you want to break through the wall, it's better to direct all the hits in one point or spread them across the wall. There you go. So if you spread them, spread the effort, the resulting contraction will not be as powerful as if effort is concentrated in one point. Does that make sense? Good. Circular, not so powerful. There are two circular muscles. Orbicularis oris and orbicularis oculi. Pennate muscles. Okay? You have multipennate, multiple branches, multiple origins, one insertion site. Bipennate, rectus femoris. Okay? The central tendon is running through the entire muscle. And unipennate. Extensor muscles, extensor digitorum. They attach to the tendons. Muscles are often run in parallel, but multi-pennate muscles especially, they produce very powerful movements because they're many short fibers. Okay? That makes sense? So the more muscle fibers you have, the more powerful the movement will be. Does it make sense? For instance, strongest muscles in your body are leg muscles because they have a lot of fibers. Muscles that move your lips or muscles that, allow you to wink, they are not as powerful. Lever systems are pretty important for understanding of movements that we produce. Levers can be with a mechanical advantage and the mechanical disadvantage. Okay? For each lever, we can identify several features. The effort. This is what we apply to the lever. Does that make sense? The load. This is what we try to move with the lever. And finally, the fulcrum. That's the point where the lever bar is stationed. Now, lever with a mechanical advantage. Distance between the fulcrum and effort is bigger than the distance between the load and the fulcrum. Does that make sense? The easiest explanation, if you have a giant boulder and you take a huge metal bar and you stick it under the boulder and you move it, you can flip the boulder over. Boulder is very heavy, but you have a really long lever. The downside of the lever with the mechanical advantage, to move that boulder just for a little bit, you have to move your end of the lever the large distance. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Okay? Got it? Now, lever with the mechanical disadvantage, you may say, come on, what's the point? That's when the effort is closer to the fulcrum than the load. Now, what is the role of the levers with mechanical disadvantage? It allows us to produce fast movements. Does that make sense? I usually give that example. When you close the door, or when you build a house, you rarely position the doorknob next to the hinges. I mean, you can. Then you will have to do like nothing to open and close the door. The movement will be very short, but it will require enormous effort, right? So door is the example of lever with a mechanical advantage. Door is heavy. Did you ever try to carry it? Yeah, it's heavy, So I move the door fairly effortlessly, but in order to open it, to move it the considerable distance, this part of the door, to move this part of the door, the very short distance, I have to move this part of the much larger distance. The best example, in my opinion, of the lever with the mechanical disadvantage is the baseball bat. Huh? Pincers? Huh? Yes. That will be, yeah. Yep. Baseball bat, why I illustrate with a baseball bat, the guys, batters, they're pretty big. Because the main component of the good hit is the speed at which the end of the bat is moving. And they hold it at the fulcrum. That's where the fulcrum is, right? They have very mechanically disadvantageous lever. They move it at a very short distance, but the end of the bat moves incredibly fast. And if you would look at the muscles in the human body, you will see that some muscles operate at the mechanical advantage, or some muscles operate at the mechanical disadvantage. And we're going to talk about it. Does that make sense? So there are 3 classes of levers. Okay? So the first class, fulcrum, is between the load and the effort. The example will be scissors. Now, if you compare scissors that used to cut the nails and scissors that used to cut the paper, what's the difference? Babe, go ahead. To the load, yep. They're closer because nails are much tougher than the paper. So you need to produce the force. Does that make sense? And with the paper scissors, the fulcrum is farther from the load. Second class lever is the wheelbarrow. Okay? If you ever try to move wheelbarrow around, you know that it's much easier to carry it when you hold at the very end. The closer you get to the load, the harder it is, because you operate with less and less advantage. And the third type of lever is when the effort is between the load and the fulcrum. Okay? This is by definition the mechanically disadvantageous lever. Does that make sense? Tweezers. If you ever worked with tweezers, you know the closer to the end you hold them, the harder it is to squeeze. Does that make sense? So like when I worked with mice, if I wanted to do some really nice work, I held tweezers closer to the end because it allowed me to manipulate them in a finer way. I didn't need that much of an effort to hold something. In translation to muscles, type 1 lever is your sternocleidomastoid muscle. Right here. Allows you to do this. And remember I told you how to know what muscles do. Just pull on them. Okay? So sternocleidomastoid muscle, okay, its origin, the sternum insertion is the mastoid process of the temporal bone. You pull on it, it goes backwards. Okay? That makes sense? Effort operating with mechanical advantage. Gastrocnemius muscle. These muscles are rather small, but when they contract, and the origin is humerus, distal humerus, okay, distal femur, I'm sorry, distal femur, okay, originated the femur. They originate right here. And gastrocnemius is inserted into the calcaneal bone. So when gastrocnemius is contracted, it puts your foot into the plantar flexion. So what you do this, right? You stand on your toes. So essentially you elevate your entire body, all, 180 pounds, by the effort of these 2 rather small muscles. Does that make sense? Okay? So you can see that the range of motion, look, range of motion is small, but the effort is pretty huge, right? The load that we can move with a rather small effort is huge. Biceps. Origin is scapula and the insertion is ulna. So you can see that the lever at which we operate with this muscle, distance between the insertion point and the fulcrum is small. Distance between the fulcrum and the load is large. It's extremely mechanically disadvantageous thing. So the amount of weight that we can curl is limited, but the range of motion and the speed is really high. Does that make sense? Not all 600. Don't worry. And I promise to publish the list. Closed list of muscles that you need to know. Okay, it's not going to be that terrible. Couple of advices on learning the muscles. As I mentioned before, the best way to eat an elephant is piece by piece. Don't try to memorize all of them in one sit. Also, I strongly not recommend to start with the muscles of the head. Because every year, what I observe is that people nail head muscles. When it comes to the muscles of the arms or the legs, to memorize them, they're exhausted and they start to struggle. When you work your way through the muscle anatomy, please change the order. Today you start with arm, then go trunk, then go legs, then go head. Tomorrow you start trunk, legs, head, hand. Does that make sense? Change the order so they will be more evenly distributed in your learning process. We good? No, come on. It's going to be easier than you think. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be easier than you think. Okay? And it's going to be picture-based, pictures of models. Models going to be on your tables, and it's multiple choice. Come on, people. It's not short answer. Okay? So, scalp and nose. This muscle right here, it's called occipitofrontalis. Occipitalis part. Whoa. Sorry, occipitalis part. And I kind of highlight the most important because often the origin is large. I'm so sorry. I totally thought now it's in airplane mode. So occipitalis part. You see that back part, little back part here? That's occipitalis. So it starts from the occipital bone and it is inserted into the structure called gallia aponeurotica. Here it is highlighted as epicranial aponeurosis. Aponeurosis is the large sheath of tendon. Can you see it? This is aponeurosis. Can you see on the back, can you see another aponeurosis? Just tell me where. Like on the back of the entire dude. Yeah, around the waist. That's called lumbar aponeurosis. Here. Yeah, well, yes, that is aponeurosis here. Okay. This is called iliotibial band. But that's aponeurosis, yes. So all those bands and large sheets of tendons, that's aponeurosis. Does that make sense? So, what's going to be the movement? that occipitalis produces. You shorten it and your scalp moves back. Does that make sense? Frontalis part, right here. Now, frontalis, this guy has, the brain is too large. Frontalis part. Okay. Frontalis part. Origin is at Gallia aponeurotica, and insertion, skin above your eyebrows. Muscle can be inserted into the skin. Does that make sense? This is what it does. You look surprised. Okay? Procerus. It's a rather small muscle. I don't even know if we can identify it here. There's a little small procerus. Okay? Frowning. Like this. Brings, so, from nose to the skin between the eyebrows. Now, please understand this, okay? Frowning. Nasalis. Bringing the tip of your nose down. Muscle covers the bridge of the nose. Right here you can see the part of nasalis, so that's procerus, and that's nasalis. Orbicularis oculi. It originates in a frontal and maxillary bones and inserts into the eyelid. This is what it does. Participates in blinking with some other muscles, squinting. Does that make sense? So in this image you can see orbicularis oculi right here, encircling the eye. And you can see the insertion in the frontal bone, and much less so, but you still can appreciate the insertion into the maxilla. Buccinator, the deep muscle. Now, to identify buccinator, it's great to use the dude. So you see deep, let me try to show it to you. So if you look at the guy right here, you find number 11 in the guy. Number 11. Yeah. Number 11 is buccinator on the dude. Okay. So it originates at your jawbones, the maxilla and mandible. And it is inserted into the orbicularis oris. You can't see it on the other side of the dude, but it is inserted here. The function of buccinator, that's really, really long, draws corners of the mouth laterally. What does that mean? What happens when you... Well, what I produced is definitely not a smile, but you're generally right. Probably more important function of buccinator is to hold the food between your teeth. It helps you to chew. Okay? And it is also doing this. Okay? It's like shaping your mouth when you're whistling. Okay? Zygomaticus bones, muscles. There are two zygomaticus muscles, zygomaticus major and minor. That's major, that is minor. You can see them being superior here, number 10 on the gentleman. Okay, we need to give him a name. This is Arnold, so I don't know. We can call him Bertie. So number 10, okay. The insertion is the corner of the mouth, okay. The origin is zygomatic bone. If you pull on that muscle, the corners of the mouth will go laterally and a little bit upward, smiling. Zygomaticus muscle is the smiling muscle. Risorius shares the tendons, the connective tissue, with the masseter muscle, which we're going to talk about. An insertion is the corner of the muscle as well. It's number 12 on the gentleman. Okay, that's risorius. It also pulls the corners of the muscle laterally. So taken together, buccinator, zygomaticus, and risorius will all participate in a smiling move. Does that make sense? Now, depressor anguli oris. This is the great example of the name. Depressor, what does that mean? Gets downward. Anguli. Which English word is it? Remind you. Angle. Corners. Okay. Oris. Mouth. Orbicularis is the circular, like orbit. Oris is the muscle. So orbicularis oris, orbicularis oculi. Circular muscle around the eye. Orbicularis oris, circular muscle around the mouth. So depressor anguli oris brings down the corners of your mouth. Okay? Insertion is the corner of the mouth as well, and obviously the origin is a mandible. Now, I'm sorry. Here, the depressor anguli oris will be number 14. Okay, if you pull on it, it will bring the corners of the mouth down. Now we're gonna, if you don't mind, we're gonna finish with the muscles of facial expression, and I will let you go. Now, these two muscles, levator labii superioris and depressor labii inferioris. Levator. Levator, going up. Depressor, going down. Labii, lips. Superioris, upper lip. Inferioris, bottom lip. So levator labii superioris, which originates in a zygomatic bone and maxilla, pulls up the upper lip. On the dude, it's the muscle number 8 with A and B here. It is cut. But it pulls the muscle, pulls the lip up. Okay? Depressor labii inferioris on the dude is number 16. Number 16. And it pulls the bottom lip down. So those are going to be the movements. So 16 is the depressor labii inferioris. This muscle. Okay, and 8 is levator labii superioris. Here it is, it's cut, it's not complete. Orbicularis oris is very simple, I'm sorry. Orbicularis oris is very simple, it's the muscle around the mouth. Okay, so origin, mandible and maxilla. Insertion, Mouth. Okay? You can see half of it under the number 15 on Birdie. We're good? Mentalis is the chin muscle. Number 17 on Birdie, and it allows you to do this. Okay? The last muscle of the facial expression is platysma. It's really big. The origin is the fascia of the chest. Here. You see that pink muscle? Okay? And insertion is the mandible. Here what it does. Like the functional movement is this. It opens your mouth. The funny movement is this. Okay? So when you tense the neck skin, it's platysma. Does that make sense? Good. We're going to wrap it up.